Our June meeting for Women IT Pros. Today we're going to talk about activating allyship. And so we have Daniel Wong and Larissa Knight who are here to talk with us about some of the work they've been doing there. We are recording this and we will post this as soon as we can after the call today. And in the chat window, what we'd love for you to do is take a minute and introduce yourself. Tell us, you don't have to be an IT pro, you don't have to be a woman, everyone is welcome at these. If you'd like to give us some of your social media information, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever else you're using these days, what area you're in, because maybe there's somebody close to you. And if you're going to go to any groups, I know a lot of them now are all virtual pretty much, but there are some exciting virtual things going on. And so I put a link to, there's a Women in Tech conference coming up in July that looks really interesting to me. So we'd love to use this as a chance to network. Feel free to have side conversations, reach out to people on social media and connect, because that's what this is all about. Participate. We have the chat window. We usually have a very active chat. The chat window is not captured after the recording. So if we see an interesting question, we may actually read it aloud so that it'll be captured in the recording. But the chat window will go away afterwards. If you do have any concerns about privacy or your information being there, again, you can leave. We don't want you to go, but we just want to make sure you feel safe here. There may be times when we'll just say, hey, come off mute because it's easier. And we also have a LinkedIn group. And so I created a tiny URL to it. I'm still kind of experimenting with some link forwarders, but I will also put the link in the chat window in a minute. And that is also open to everyone. We'd love to get some conversations going in there about how to best support women in the IT pro space. So upcoming events and calls. So the next event, I believe, is actually going to be our meetup in AltSpace. And if you haven't checked out AltSpace VR yet, it's really interesting, and you don't need a VR headset, but you can have many conversations going in the same room, unlike something in Teams where you got me talking and you all listening. So if you're around, really love for you to come and join us for that. There is a little bit of onboarding, but we'll help you get through it. And then in July, it looks like our meeting is going to be the next one that'll happen. And we have Modern Mentorship and the Art of Storytelling with Sarah Haggard, which is going to be a great one. And the APAC call then is usually on the last Wednesday of the month, or last Thursday of the month, which is Wednesday for us in our time. The EU meetings are taking off for July because they're in the summer. They ran out of Spain and Portugal, and a lot of Europe is on vacation. Mentor. So the Tribute Mentor app is a great place to go. And in fact, Sarah Haggard, who's going to be our guest in July, she is the one who built the Tribute platform. And she has a great story, and she's going to talk about the storytelling. There's some interesting tribes that Shauna, who runs that, is setting up now. So they just launched one for security women, and that's being led by Ryan, who's a fantastic security advocate. And there's also one about mental health on there. And then you can also join smaller groups for a little accountability circle so that you have someone to talk to when you're having just one of those days and you need to just vent some things. So with that, one more thing. We do have a survey that will ask you to fill out at the end of the event. And so I'll also put that in the chat window. If you have to go early, please do it on your way out the door. And we really encourage you to let us know what topics you want to cover, what things you want to hear about, and how we can do better here. And I also just wanted to do a reminder. I see a lot of people from Microsoft here because a lot of the people who have started organizing Women IT Pros events are from Microsoft, but it's not a Microsoft specific thing. Everybody in the world is welcome. And, if you are from Microsoft, you're welcome too. Just make sure you know that, we're not trying to speak for Microsoft or talk about Microsoft internal things. Even though our speakers in this case are from Microsoft, that's not always the case. But this week we have Larissa Knight, a program manager in storage and file system, and Daniel Wong, who is Microsoft Consulting Services. And they are going to tell you about this amazing group that they have started about allyship. So with that, Larissa and Daniel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy.
I'm about to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, Daniel, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess quick introduction. I'll go first, and then Larissa can go. So as Kathy's slide said, I'm Daniel Wong. I'm an Azure migration consultant based out of Phoenix, Arizona. I've been with Microsoft about 3.5 years, and I guess Larissa, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Larissa Knight. I've also been with Microsoft for about 3 years. I am a program manager within the storage and file systems team, and I work with REFS specifically. And yeah, just excited to present with you all. Back to you, Daniel.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So allyship is a topic that we started together with really right when we started Microsoft. The quick introduction of how we got into allyship was really began right when we started. We started together, onboarded together, went through the whole process, and then Larissa started in consulting with me, and as we went through the onboarding, we quickly became really good friends. Um, we're constantly checking in on each other to see how we were doing. And we finished our 3 months of onboarding and started going on to our first projects. Being consultants, we run into some additional challenges as deployed resources. And like Kathy said, we're here to talk about our experiences in some of those experiences, or in some of those different situations, and really how we've gone down the path of allyship and our thoughts on it. And like Kathy said, we're not here representing Microsoft's view on allyship. We're just talking about our personal journeys. But really, we started getting on projects about 4 months in at Microsoft, and we would constantly check back in with each other. And I remember my first project, I was very fortunate. I got on a really good project right away with a really good team, and they were just so quick to help me onboard, so quick to push me to take initiative and really have agency, and they empowered me to speak up and really own a lot of the project. Um, so it was just a really amazing experience. And when Larissa started her first project, she just had a really different experience being alone on her first project. She felt like the customer wasn't as accepting of her. Um, I remember there was a specific point about a month in where I had a conversation with one of the directors at my customer, and I walked into the room, and usually we've been meeting over Skype and had conversations before, but I walked into the room and there was a director and his boss, and I remember them looking at me for a moment and recognizing that I was young. I'm 26, so 3.5 years ago, I was 23, walking into a room with a director and his manager, and I just remember noticing the look on their faces, and they looked at me and saw that I was young, and then immediately decided that doesn't matter. We're just going to treat him as we would anybody else, and we were able to have really productive conversations, and I was able to drive a really successful relationship with these two key customer resources, and it really helped make that project successful. And I shared that experience with Larissa, and she just shared the complete opposite with me. She said, no, I go into customer sites and they're constantly challenging me on everything technical. They're constantly quizzing me. It's just a battle to always try and establish credibility. And we had conversations about that. And initially I said, hey, it's just, you're just unlucky. You got on a project with a bad customer. You don't have a team. You don't have the support, and you just got unlucky. Just after a couple more projects, you'll get a good project like mine, and it'll be great. And we continued working on various projects, and again and again, Larissa would come back with these stories, and it took me a lot longer to really recognize the difference in privilege that I had versus her. And it really took 3 months of these conversations where again and again Larissa would come back and tell me about these scenarios where she faced challenges, where she was challenged by the customer in ways that I had never experienced. I have never experienced still to this day after almost 4 years in consulting. And after a few months of this, we Larissa finally convinced me, like, hey, this isn't it's not just a bad project. It's not just unlucky customers. I'm facing different challenges than you are because I'm a woman. And I don't know, Larissa, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so as Daniel highlighted, we came in very similar backgrounds, and Daniel was very much so supported, very much so customers would immediately accept everything he said. And me, I would constantly get customers, as Daniel said, that would just question everything I would say. They would play the stump the chump or stump the consultant with me. They would assume that I was a salesperson, or they'd assume that I had nothing to do with being a technical resource at all. And it was a really hard experience for me personally, because I came from, in college, you just do your work, you submit that paper, and then you get graded, and you're like, yay, doing well at school. But ultimately, having to be on site with customers, there's so much more that's like interpersonal dynamics that I had to work to overcome, that I personally wasn't that much, wasn't really that versed in how to kind of navigate the space. And so whenever I would talk with Daniel, it was always just like, ugh, you're doing fine and everything is okay, and you're doing the exact same thing I'm doing, but you are just swimming so smoothly, and I'm having to just go in this uphill battle. So I reached out to a lot of internal communities that we have at Microsoft, but I just heard a lot of echoes of, yeah, that happens to me all the time. Yeah, that's so true, happens. And so I just heard like, yes, 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 of course this happens. And I wasn't getting the, well, why, like, what are you doing to change this? How can we, like, this is a systematic problem. How can we work through this? So I was actually setting up a Women at Microsoft conference in Dallas, and I was looking into different conferences that have happened, and I came across one that was called Male Allyship, and I actually sent it to Daniel, and I was like, hey, what is this? Let's learn more about allyship, and I'll let Daniel speak to the conference.
Yeah, and it was just an amazing experience. It was the Anita B Male Allyship Summit. They have it every year, and I just went back again this past year. But Larissa sent it to me, and after some of the conversations we had, I just knew it was really important to me to go to this and learn more and find better ways to support the people I work with and make a more inclusive environment and make an environment where everybody is able to be successful and everybody is able to the resources that I'm with, like working with Larissa and seeing somebody as talented as her struggling with these terrible situations, to be able to create a better environment for the people I work with. And so that was actually the first time I heard about allyship when Larissa shared this conference with me. So I went to the conference, an amazing experience. Definitely recommend it to anybody who's able to go. The Anita B Male Ally Summit. And it was the first time where I really got to take a deep look at my privilege and really get a deeper understanding of systemic sexism and systemic misogyny and how the systems in play, especially in IT, especially in technical roles, just create a really uninclusive environment and what I can do. So we came back from that, and I started presenting on some internal calls because I was so fired up about what I learned. And then from there, for the past 2 years, Larissa and I have just continued to really make a practice effort to check in with each other every week and constantly share resources with each other and constantly learn and continue down this journey of allyship. And I say journey because it's something that we're going to reiterate again and again. I say journey because it really is. It's not something you check a box and you're an ally after you learn about it. There's just constantly more to learn. And every time I feel like I start to get a good handle on it, I learn more. And it's been an amazing journey so far. And we just want to come here today and share some of the experiences we've had and some of the things we've learned.
Daniel had some comments that it's a little hard to hear you, and I know so for people who don't know, Daniel's actually on a camping trip right now, and he still called in because we had this set up, and bless him. But I don't know if you can maybe make it a little closer or a little louder.
Yeah, how is this better?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, apologies. Like Kathy said, I'm actually on a camping trip, but didn't want to miss this opportunity, and I love what I've seen from this call, so definitely didn't want to miss it. But apologies about the weak connection.
Coming in okay now?
Yeah, I think it's better. RG to let us know if it's not.
Yeah, no worries. So really, I was talking to Kathy and Daniel about this right now. I just realized that we are coming up on tomorrow will be our full year anniversary of when we started this call series. So ultimately the goal of, thanks for the clapping, Kathy. The goal of our call series is really to build a group of allies and make sure that it's not just that, yeah, I attended this one series or I attended this one training and yep, I'm an ally, that's done. No, it's, as Daniel said, it's a journey, it's reoccurring, we're constantly learning. And we're also wanting to build empathy within our work and our spaces. And through that, we're sharing stories. So how we structure our meetings is we'll have the first half, we'll share some topics, like inclusion topics, what we're going to cover today with y'all. But we have a forum and we ask people if there's something that they would like to hear from us or want to discuss or really further unpack together as a community, then we are always open to it. But so we do the first half with the topics, and then the second half, we like to just open it up for discussion. And we like to call it an equipping discussion, and it'll make a little bit more sense once we get going. So, Daniel, did the slide move? No, it did not.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we've been really fortunate. That's one of the big ways we've been able to grow is through this call series. A really great group of people who attend, and we're always able to have incredible discussions. And hearing the way different people face different challenges has just been tremendous for helping us be prepared, helping me personally be prepared for some of the situations that I see or others have seen in the workplace. But to talk about some of the topics that we think are really critical to the introduction of allyship, the first place I always like to start is intersectionality. And that's the idea that race, class, gender, all the individual characteristics that a person has intersect to form one social identity. And it was originally a critique by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw on the modern feminist movement, and that the modern feminist movement was really focused on white women, and that being a Black woman, she faced many different challenges, many different forms of repression than a white woman had, and that really brings us to some of these points here, that the experiences of discrimination are going to vary so significantly between different people based on all different characteristics of identity. Gender obviously plays a really huge role, sexuality, race, ethnicity, age. There's just so many different characteristics of a person's identity, and all of them intersect to form the challenges that people are going to face, and the privileges that people receive. So what that really means for us and what we really like to take away with it in our discussions is, one, be mindful that there are other forms of discrimination. We will talk about things typically in the frame of male allyship and forms of oppression that women face, but some of those, we try and keep the topics generalized enough that things can be applied to other forms of oppression, other forms of challenges that people face. And also just remember that we're focusing on a narrow scope, but any step forward towards a more equal, more inclusive workspace is beneficial for everybody. Which takes us to I love the phrase that it's not the oppression Olympics. You hear so often that when you start talking about challenges that someone faces in the workplace, challenges that women particularly face in the workplace, men will also bring up like, hey, it hasn't been all rainbows for me. I face lots of challenges too. I worked hard to get where I am, and maybe they did. I'm sure they did, certainly, and they certainly face many challenges that are unique to them. But that doesn't take away at all from the challenges that women face. And just because one group faces challenges doesn't mean that we can't narrow our scope and focus on the challenges and forms of oppression that another group face. So it's really important to keep in mind there that we don't let challenges that somebody faces detract from a conversation about specific forms of oppression. And then the last point too is that being an ally is a journey. There's always more to learn. That's something that we just added to this slide because with everything going on in the U.S. right now, we noticed that this is a really great opportunity. I think there's a really great opportunity for myself to expand some of my learnings from being focused on women and the challenges that women face, especially in technical roles, to looking at race a lot more. And so intersectionality to me means always provides an opportunity to look into more, always to learn more challenges that people face. And I think because allyship is about learning what other people are facing, other challenges, other forms of oppression, there's just always more to learn, and it's been a humbling experience for me. Larissa, did you have anything to add on the slide?
Not really. I think you really hit on some great points, especially it's Pride, but it's also it's Pride Month in the US, but it's also, we are in this Black Lives Matter movement that is so significant. And so I really appreciate that we are kind of starting this call with talking through intersectionality, because it's all present right now. So we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so the next topic we always love to talk about is privilege, which is so tied into anything we discuss when we're looking at race, looking at gender. And we start with the definition of privilege as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. And an example of that is going back to Larissa and I's story. When I walked into the room with that director, an experience that was really intimidating to me, and I did not have to go prove my technical aptitude. I was just able to walk in and control the meeting as I was supposed to, lead the meeting as I was supposed to lead it, and have the conversations that I was supposed to have without being challenged on my technical ability. And we compare that to Larissa's story, where she goes into customer sites and is getting quizzed on the technologies, or being told things like, oh no, we're going to wait for the real technical person to show up. That to me was just like really eye-opening opportunity to recognize the privilege that I had that she didn't. And it's an important thing to remember with privilege is that privilege is the opposite of oppression. Anytime somebody's experiencing privilege, it comes at the expense of somebody else. So it can be, privilege can be not having to do something. So I did not have to prove my technical aptitude, or it can be a different benefit in gaining something. So it can also be that I tend to get looked at for technical answers more easily than Larissa. And that was another conversation that we had, is that for me, I'm more likely for customers to come directly to me for asking technical questions and looking for answers. And it was just a much easier experience for me. And going back to what we said with meritocracy, having privilege does not mean you haven't experienced depression. Everybody's experienced some sort of challenges, some sort of disadvantage because of their identity, because of their life. And having privilege does not mean that you haven't experienced depression. And having privilege doesn't mean that you can't combat other forms of depression. And then the last point we really want to hit on here is it's often a blind spot. Recognizing privilege can be so challenging to pick up on. When you grow up, you'll spend your whole life getting a benefit that you don't realize that you innately get just for being you. Then addressing privilege can just be a really challenging discussion. Like I said, it took months for Larissa to really convince me of my privilege. We discussed different scenarios that she faced that I didn't face. I think it was really 3 months before we really had that breakthrough moment where I was like, wow, you're really right. I can't imagine ever experiencing some of the things that you've experienced. And so it can be a challenge, and that's why allyship is so important, to help provide more people the opportunity to convince people of the privilege that they have, and really leverage that privilege to creating a more inclusive environment. Larissa, do you have anything to add about privilege?
Yeah, I appreciate what you kind of hit on there, Daniel. And something to note here is I love the second bullet, because in our story that Daniel and I share on different calls, it makes it seem like I'm this victim, but I definitely have a lot of privilege. I definitely come into spaces and have privilege, but it's important to recognize in positions where you're at, like where you have added privilege. So in times when you're like, you are owning that meeting, you have that privilege of possibly interrupting or just correcting someone that is saying something that is possibly offensive to another person in a meeting, or just recognizing that you have different privileges in different spaces is something I want to just really highlight on this slide. But other than that, it's great. Another topic we wanted to hit on is meritocracy. So meritocracy is the idea that one is chosen and moved ahead based on the merit of their work. And I'll be totally honest, as I referenced at the beginning of this call, this is something that I'm very guilty of. This is how I thought the world works. I could just, do my homework and get graded and get those A's and yay, everything is going to be fine. But really, that's not how the world actually works, because the important part of this definition that we really like to include here is that like one is chosen and moved ahead based on the merit of their work. But the thing that you're not seeing is the visibility, like who is actually seeing that work that you're doing. Is that work being highlighted? Is that work being shared across different spaces? Or are you just working your butt off and no one has any idea about it, and you might not move as up the chain as you're wanting to? So we also included the Satya quote from the Grace Hopper. What year, Daniel, do you remember what year this was? But he said
I believe it was 2014.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, at in 2014, where he basically kind of acknowledged that that's how he thought the world works with meritocracy. And if you read his book, he learned a lot from this moment. And I think we can all learn a lot from this moment of it's an easy way to think that if you're just going to do your work, it's going to be fine. But that's not truly how things go. Anything else you wanted to add here, Daniel?
No, I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head, and I think meritocracy really ties, it goes hand in hand with looking at privilege. If you're in a point of privilege, you often think that the world works in a certain way that, exactly as Satya said, you can just put your head down and do your work, and you're going to get rewarded for it. I remember, I was so guilty of this, and that's why it was so hard for me to really recognize my privilege, is that I just really believed that everything that I had, I earned, and that I worked hard, and I just attribute everything I have to my hard work. But having those discussions with Larissa about advantages that I have, challenges that I don't have to face, really, it's just so eye-opening to recognize, to hear some of those, and really break down like, hey, if I'm receiving these advantages, then we really can't be operating in a meritocracy, right? Exactly like this picture shows. Like, if one person's running a race with very few obstacles and another person is running a race with a whole bunch of obstacles, then being the first to the finish line there doesn't really mean that or you're able to get to the end faster and more easily than the other person, just because of your identity. And so to me, it shows that it's a challenging thing to break down, but really it's one of the most effective ways to identify privilege and one of the easiest conversations to have, because I know a lot of people have started receiving unconscious bias training, implicit bias training, and so if one recognizes that there is implicit bias, that there are advantages that one person receives or disadvantages that another person receives based on their identity, then you can't be operating on a meritocracy. It can't work that way. So it's just a really easy tool that I found to help challenge some people to really like analyze their privilege.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Daniel. I attended an allyship training maybe a year back, and it was a 3-hour segment, and we got to it was 3-hour training, and we got to the privilege slide, and we spent about 2 hours on that, because the entire group couldn't embrace the fact that they had privilege. They like, well, I went to college, I earned my degree, of course I have this job. And it was on, like, the moderators were constantly like, well, did you have to pay for college? Did you have to have a job in college? Did you have a family that you had to support in college? Do you have a family that you have to support now? And it was just really fascinating to understand, like, to really sit in a room full of people that I was at a different point in my allyship journey, but they were very much so kind of at the beginning of their allyship journey. And it was just a very eye-opening that we all have a long way to go. And I agree with Daniel's point of meritocracy is a good way to highlight different privileges. So we'll go on to definition of allyship. This is Daniel and Maya's joint definition of allyship coming from a myriad of backgrounds, but is a commitment to making commitment to making continuous, intentional decisions to leverage their privilege to understand, empathize, and act in support of those who experience marginalization. I know these are intense words, but I love the continuous part of it because, as Daniel and I have said, and we're going to say a lot, it is a journey. You're constantly having to check in, and as the world is growing and as you are working with different people from different backgrounds, you're constantly needing to just understand where different people are coming from and really try to understand them and to really build that empathy within yourself, and so that we can have a more inclusive environment. So it is a commitment to learn, listen and learn to the experiences of others and use that privilege to help others as they want to be helped. And then something with allyship is that we really like to highlight is the intent versus impact. I had a situation at a customer site where this isn't exactly my, I'll just surmise it, but we're all going to get ID badge pictures, and someone, so this is an interesting story that we have talked about at another call. But so we're all going to get ID badge pictures, and then a person turns around and looks at the girl and says, "Oh, did you want to go and get your makeup done?" Or like, "Do you want to go fix yourself up?" And only looks at the girl. And the problem with this situation is the guy is thinking that he's being super inclusive, trying to make sure that everyone is like ready for the situation. But because of that action, that has a negative effect on the female, because it was just, the impact is very offensive. And there are a lot of other examples that Daniel and I could talk through right now of the difference between intent and impact, but you have to make sure that how you are acting and think through kind of the result of this. Daniel, did you have something you wanted to touch on with this?
Yeah, just further emphasizing intent versus impact is that additionally, it's owning responsibility and being able to say, hey, this is what I intended, but there's an impact that I did not intend with my actions. And one of the biggest parts of being ally is like we said a million times, it's a journey. You're going to make mistakes, and you have to be able to recognize when your impact and your intent are not aligned, and you have to own the impact. We see a lot now where people say, "Oh, but I'm not a racist," as they did something that negatively affects a person of color. And it doesn't matter what your intent in those situations are. If you have an impact that's negative, you need to own it. You need to take responsibility for it, try and right it or correct it, and also definitely learn. I mean, as an ally, you're gonna run into situations again and again where you make mistakes, and the important thing to do is to learn, to surround yourself with people who you can learn from. And that's one of the big things we get from our allyship call. That it's an incredible group of people who all know so much, and they correct me time and again when I mess up, and that's one of the reasons why I've been able to learn, and that's one of the reasons why I've been able to continue to grow for years, and what's made it such a good experience. And the other thing I want to highlight too is this quote from Ibram X. Kendi on anti-racism, and it's about racism and anti-racism. But like we said before, a lot of these inclusion topics can span or can focus on any sort of marginalized group. And it goes to a racist or anti-racist is not who we are, but what we are doing in the moment. And what I really love about that is that it really takes being a racist or anti-racist, or being an ally, as not something that is a point of identity, but something that you have to continuously do again and again. You continuously have to recognize the impact that you're having, and own the responsibility, or own the impact that you have if it doesn't align with your intent. You constantly have to be looking at ways that examining your biases, constantly learning about the different challenges that different marginalized groups face. And it was a really big shift in mindset for me to look at it, not as a point of identity, but look at it as something that is tied to action and something that needs to be continuously proven.
Yeah, that's a great point, Daniel. And especially as we are, I mean, Daniel and I have a lot of context of just working with customers, and when you're working with different teams that might have some maybe ageism and sexism and secret, I don't know, some team dynamics that are not as great. Allyship is honestly one of the greatest tools, in my opinion, to really accelerate diversity and inclusion, because you can have this really diverse team, but if they're not really feeling like they belong or they are really valued as a team, then it's just not going to work. So making sure that you have that ally, you have that ability to work with people that are joining your team that might be different or have different backgrounds than you. This is just a great tool that we've been using. So anything else you wanted to hit on, Daniel?
No, I don't think so. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that I've been seeing in the chat right now. Another really, I really like what Shelley brought up earlier. A lot of women assume that, or a lot of men assume women automatically support women, but in tech, that is too often just not the case. I think that's something too that is really important to highlight, is that these inclusion topics are things that, you know, just because someone is in a marginalized group doesn't mean that they know everything about, and because of intersectionality, different people are going to face different challenges, and they're going to run into different situations that other people have. So just always, you know, an important thing to keep in mind is that just because someone is of a marginalized group doesn't mean that they are an expert on that marginalized group. That's another form of privilege that comes into place often, is that not being in a marginalized group, you don't have to you don't ever get looked at as a representative of that group, of your group. So yeah, just a good call out from Shelley there. But yeah, we can continue on those. I think we had some slides up next to actually dive into some of the forms of marginalization.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we like to structure our calls as kind of the first half content, second half discussion. And so each call that we have will have kind of a theme. And this one we wanted to just highlight gender-based unconscious biases in the workplace. And this is a group activity, so please feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat, and we're just going to go through these different bullets. So the first situation that we're going to talk about is when someone expects a woman should take on extra domestic and social tasks like meeting planning, event organizing, common area cleaning, note taking, things like that. And really what we're wanting from this community is just how either you, if this situation has happened to you, how you would respond in this situation, or if you are an aspiring ally, how would you either interrupt or how would you kind of shift that focus from it being automatically put on a woman to, hey, how can we share this task? How would you respond?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do a lot of here is really trying to be very aware of tasks getting assigned, and it's something that I have a lot of trouble recognizing. So I try and be extra intentional about it, but I always try and offer, knowing that I don't usually get looked at to take notes or set up meetings. I always try and offer to take those responsibilities as they come down, or redirect them to other people, like, hey, is there something that you could do? Could you set up these meetings for us? Just redirecting them away from somebody who appears to be getting them more often than others.
And again, if people want to come off mute or in the chat window.
Yeah.
I know for my team, the manager wasn't asking the woman to take the notes. He had to leave. And so he said, can somebody take the notes? And, so one of the women spoke up and said, well, I think one of the guys should do it. But, I think what we decided is, it's good to rotate it. It's good to give everybody a chance doing it because it really does, it contributes to the entire team.
Yeah, this is Diane. At the same time, I sometimes think taking the notes is a position of power, right? So she who writes the notes controls what happened in the meeting. So it can also, avoid some of the bropations, right? Because I can, in the notes, I can say Diane had an idea of or whatever, or Susan, or lift up somebody else in the room. So I don't necessarily avoid note taking as a rule, just because it's traditionally seen as an admin or woman's task. So I think we can think broadly about these things as well.
So I've I'm from Microsoft, and I've heard from Daniel and Larissa before, and they're fabulous. I put my name is Justine, and I put the note in there about going through university in the 90s in an engineering discipline, and basically having to change my program to get out from under the old boys club. I do a lot of what people call covering. I made the mistake of wearing feminine clothing to work once at Microsoft. I will never do it again. Even people who respected me thought it was funny to ask me if I was joining HR. So there are a lot of these things that we come up against that are just, like you said, unconscious. To this point, for covering, I don't wear any feminine clothing. I actually use male antiperspirant, so I don't have a floral smell or anything like that. I don't know what other people do, and I don't know how to undo that in myself. So there you go. That's my experience in a nutshell.
That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think I have something similar where, I kind of have a uniform that I wear for work, a cardigan, a certain type of skirt, because I never want to draw attention to, my feminine body per se. And it kind of speaks to hiding the fullness of who you are just to be in that work environment, because it can be used against you, right? So I totally hear what you're saying there.
Yeah, and I think it's both really good points. I think covering is something that it came up. Microsoft released internal content when we first started talking about Allyship. Covering also got brought up right away, and that's the hiding, the masking, downplaying of a certain part of your social identity, or doing something to downplay your social identity. And it's something that I didn't really understand the value or the gravity of until pretty recently. I remember evaluating a couple weeks ago and thinking more about covering. And one of the things that it really struck me is that covering just shows, it does such a big show of a workplace being non-inclusive, and people not being able to bring their full selves. What's the point of having diversity in a workplace if everybody is downplaying their social identities and trying to be the same person? If a group is homogeneous, if everybody's trying to be homogeneous and look and act the same, then what's the point of diversity? And you're not gaining that benefit of inclusion.
Yeah, I totally agree that some mentees who
Someone's speaking, but it's coming in really faint.
That's me. My mic wasn't in the right place. Anyway, I was saying some of my mentees are very young women in technical field who had a lot of trouble because they were very feminine looking, and they didn't try to be one of the boys, or really couldn't be easily. It would have looked odd. And it was kind of struck me in some of the conversations I'd have with them, just about how many times they would be sort of admonished for not leaning in enough and not being aggressive enough, not kind of taking charge of the situation or something. And they weren't exactly shy, retiring flowers either, but they just had a certain manner and style that was kind of more feminine, whatever you take it as. Everybody has their own, character and style that they come in with, but they just got a lot of grief for that. I ended up telling them just ignore it because we need all sorts of types. And your ability to handle some situations is going to be needed. And we don't need a bunch of alpha types in every single meeting. So just ignore and, do a good job, do the best you can. But, that kind of, there seemed to be a real strong, especially for the more attractive young women, they tended to get caught up in that kind of criticism. And they'd be wondering if they needed to change. And I just think, like Daniel said, big mistake. Don't do that.
Yeah, Shelley, I couldn't agree more with that point. Honestly, and then it just creates such a double bind because you're either too quiet or you're too assertive. It's not like you have no space to actually truly be whatever the personality you are. So I love that you give the guidance of just keep going, just ignore it. And if anyone has any other kind of pro tips of what you've done in these situations.
Hi, this is Gina. Sorry. I would say, one thing that has helped me is to just sort of listen, the group dynamics in a situation, you really have to discern, if that's the right word, who you're dealing with and know how to navigate that, So definitely it's important to be yourself because that's where your power is, right? That's where your confidence kind of stems from. When you're trying to be something else, I think you're actually weakening yourself and you're not bringing your full strengths into the team. So I would just recommend to just kind of lean in and see what's happening just interrelationally, to just see, okay, what are we dealing with here?
Yeah.
Hi guys,
absolutely.
this is Sajid. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I just want to give a little perspective from a male perspective. As Kathy knows me, I'm a true ally, and all that stuff. But what I do want to emphasize to all of you, is that I almost used the word guys. I caught myself there. Is that we have to be careful about how much we push gender at the workplace, right? It's sometimes it comes across as over the top and it's just way too PC or in that sense. Oftentimes, I find men they are actually pretty scared. They're scared to say the wrong thing. They're scared to do the wrong, could be taken a wrong way. I've talked to many female, colleagues and peers and things like that, and even women who work at Microsoft, and they will either tell me that sometimes some of the stuff comes up it's a bit too much, and they don't want to be associated in that sense where, feel sorry for me, feel pity for me, and that kind of thing. We need to find a balance somehow that we can, be allies. And when I mentioned earlier in the chat that, allies does not mean that, you just stick these things in your email signatures and stuff like that, right? It needs to be actionable. We either have to, if we see biases and discriminatory, things that are happening, we have to stand up. We have to speak up. We have to defend. we have to put ourselves at risk to make sure that all voices are heard. That's how I feel about things, you know. And to me, what I, you know, especially what I'm really involved with now is the whole racism, you know, climate that's happening in our country and all that stuff. And it's near and dear to me because I face it all the time, right? So I'm also now questioning people about you claim you're anti-racist. Well done, great for you. And you're changing your profile pictures or whatever you're doing, you know, it makes you feel good. But are you going to stand up there for me when I'm facing this stuff faced, you know, in reality? Or are you going to be more of a bumper sticker kind of anti-racist, right? So just trying to put a little perspective into people here that there's more to this than quotes and things like that.
Yeah, Harjeet, and I think going back to, I think that's a really good point. Is that an important thing to remember with allyship is, you obviously brought up a few points, but one of the things that really hit home is that we need to make sure as an ally that you're never assuming that you know what's right. That's one of the big challenges that I've struggled with. As I learn more, I start to feel like I really know the subject, but really I have to constantly step back and say, hey, these experiences that I'm talking about, these situations I'm talking about, are not my experiences. They're not situations that I've been in. They're situations that people have told me about, that they've described to me, and that I try and look out for. But because I don't experience them personally, I don't know the correct way to. I don't know the correct way to be an ally always, and I don't know how a person wants me to be an ally. Different people want different things from an ally. I think in certain situations, like you said, somebody doesn't necessarily want you to call out the differences in their identity. If the environment feels really non-inclusive, then calling out somebody's challenges that they're facing because they feel othered might be detrimental to what they want. So constantly needing to step back there. And then another point you said too was that really struck me was that, and I've heard a lot, is that oftentimes people get really uncomfortable with not understanding and not knowing what the right thing to say is. They're worried that they might say the wrong thing. They're worried that they might mess up. And I think it's important to call people out and have conversations on that. I think to me that just shows a lack of understanding of the situation and presents an opportunity as an ally to sit down and have a conversation like, hey, you know, these systemic racism, systemic misogyny, it's part of this society, and it's something that we need to address. And so, like, yeah, there are things that you can't say and do, but you have to know why you can't say and do them. Just knowing that you're not allowed to say and do something creates that sense of fear of like, hey, if I don't understand what the problem is, then I might mess up and make a mistake. So to me, that presents an opportunity to sit down and have some of these conversations as an ally.
I just wanted to jump in and add as well. My Wi-Fi has cut in and out a couple times, so I hope this hasn't been said before, but I think just ask. Like, there's a lot of fear over, like, what do I say? What do I do? And I think that, like, you can just ask people how they want to be supported. And then I think that also shows, you know, your, you know, where you're coming from. And also, I think has, like, one of the better success rates. You know, I also, like, trying to put yourself out, or putting yourself out there and making mistakes is okay as well and appreciated. But I also think, like, when you can, it's okay to just reach out to people and, like, see how they want to be supported.
Yeah, and this is another Jasmine here, if you guys can hear me. I as a Black woman in technology at Microsoft, in sales, I mean, I just think a lot of times, just, you know, speaking from my experience, like, empathy, I think, is needed, right? Because it's like, you know, if you're not a Black woman, you don't know what Black women go through, right? You know, on a day-to-day basis, and things from appropriations like our hair to, I think a woman said before, just, covering up, maybe your body because you don't want a dress maybe on me looks different than on someone else. Like different things that I feel that I have to think about that a lot of other people don't have to think about. Maybe won't think twice of and think it's not a big deal, and kind of understanding, well, it's a big deal to me, right? And being an ally is having that empathy and understanding, how others feel and kind of creating a safe space. Because I think one big thing in corporate America is there's a lot of subtle things that happen, right? Someone's not going to come out and tell you, your hair is unprofessional. They're going to stare at you in the break room and make you feel awkward in front of other people, right? It's not always blatant out there. And I kind of have emotional intelligence, I like to think. So I can see, right? A person doesn't have to explicitly tell me like, oh, I don't, that may make them feel uncomfortable, or they've never seen a hairstyle like that. Like I can tell, right? And that doesn't make me feel good. And I don't want to come to work every day having to, let me, be modest. Let me not be myself. I can't express myself when everybody else can. So that's just like a simple, something from my perspective that I go through that I feel like, if you see people making others feel uncomfortable or different subtle comments or something, don't just like let it happen. If you see someone always being talked over during a meeting, like being an ally, part of being an ally is, like those I know we have 2 minutes left, but like those those really good productions of training that we have. I can't think of the name, but how like it was a girl in a wheelchair and she kept getting, everyone kept talking over her in the meeting, and after another girl stayed behind and say like, are you okay? I think she even pinged her during the meeting, like, just things like that. Like that's being an ally. So that's my 2 cents.
Yep, and we are,
Yeah,
great comments. We are running a little tight. I know Jermaine has her hand up, and then I also want to give Daniel and Larissa a chance to wrap up. So maybe Jermaine, if you can just do your comment quickly. And
Sure. And I mean, just to the point of what to do, what do I do or what do I say as an ally? I think if we look at the situation right now with systemic racism, I think it's safe to say that we are seeing systemic sexism too in our world. And it's the same that the burden shouldn't be held by the marginalized community and women. We shouldn't think that we need to carry that weight ourselves. And as an ally itself too, allies will have to go through their learnings, and we are not going to all we speak to our Black community friends and check in with them and all that, have the connection and empathy through this conversation. But I think more importantly, as an ally, at least from that learning, is that I think that the burden is the responsibility is on the ally to go and seek learning yourself, to go and seek books, videos, and any kind of resource that you have, and to educate yourself around this area. And while you have conversations, because really your learning path is what you own it, and you really have to invest in that. That's why now, at Microsoft, I know this is not Microsoft call, but at Microsoft, we are sent a list of resources that we can go to educate ourselves, to listen and learn, and it's part of a process. Thank you.
Great comment, Jermaine. Thank you. And Daniel, Larissa, we got to wrap up. Do you want to have any closing comments here?
Yeah, definitely. First off, thank you everyone who shared, and Jermaine and Jasmine for those last comments. Those are all so incredibly powerful, and absolutely agree with you. Just wanted, in closing, I wanted to re-emphasize the importance too of having, like we said, equipping discussions, because learning about the challenges that people face is only one step of the process. You actually have to train yourself to, because those situations happen so fast, you have to train yourself. You have to have those conversations of, hey, when the situation arises, how am I going to respond? So we didn't get to really go through that, but I think that's another important step of allyship. Larissa, did you have anything else?
That was my exact point. We're always on the same brainwave. I love it. Yeah, really just making sure that we are making space for these conversations. And I love the participation that everyone brought up here. These are amazing points. So just if you can replicate maybe this conversation in your group. And I remember someone put in the chat about how similar to the values conversation that we had within Microsoft, maybe last year, I think it was. Anyway, but just making sure that this is a constant muscle that you're working to grow and build community with.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to remind again, this is not a Microsoft only call. We have people from every company is welcome to attend. If you are at Microsoft, Daniel or Larissa, if you could put the information for the internal people to find your allyship series so that they can do it. And if you're not at Microsoft and don't have an allyship series, hey, talk to Daniel and Larissa. You can find them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to start one. And they can tell you, because a lot of Women IT Pros is really just saying, I want to start something to bring people together. And we can help you do that. We'll give you the resources. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you being here today. I did put in the chat window how to find our calls, both internal at Microsoft and external. Follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. And join our LinkedIn group. I forgot to put it in the chat window, but I will add that in there as well. And our next call in July, Blair's Day, July is going to be about storytelling with Sarah Haggard, who does the Tribute tool that we use for matching up people and mentoring in the Humans of IT community. So it's going to be a great call. Hope you join us. Oh, and then in August, we're actually going to have mentorship again as a topic. We're going to have Ava Helen come and talk about some allyship research that she's done. It's going to be really interesting. So welcome and thank you to all the men who came today. We really appreciate you being here for this and learning this. And we just value your allyship. And I'm going to stop the recording now. But we will